It was one of the most joyful events I had ever attended. It was 9 years ago. I was living in Tulsa and at Bishop Kelly High School, and a few months before, we had an alumnus who was a federal judge, and he called me and he said, "Hey, would this high school be interested in hosting a naturalization ceremony where people become citizens of the United States? Would you be interested in hosting that?" I said, "Absolutely. Name the day, name the time, and the whole school will be there." So it was kind of middle of the day, springtime, and the whole school was there. So 950 students, faculty, staff, parents, 1,000 or so people or more. And what we saw that day was 50 individuals from 23 different countries who on that day became citizens of the United States. For many, it was a long journey, years and years. Some of them had come here maybe for jobs or for school. Others came here fleeing persecution in their own countries. They came here seeking asylum. But it was an incredibly joyful day. Many of the 50 people, their families were there, children, grandparents. It was an unbelievable, joyous occasion. Tears were shed, American flags and flags from all these different countries of the world. One woman was just so sort of overcome by emotion. She was crying on the floor. Right? It was just an unbelievable, joyful day. I think of that every time I hear St. Paul to the Philippians when he says, our citizenship is in heaven. What I saw that day was, for these 50 individuals and their family, unbelievable joy at becoming citizens, not of heaven, but of a particular country. For them, it was a dream fulfilled. Despite all of the many flaws that we have here in the United States, this is, for many people, kind of a promised land. They had reached this incredible goal. And I think about the joy that I saw that day. And then I like to think about the joy that is going to take place in eternal life. If people are that happy, that joyful, overcome with emotion to become citizens of a particular country, imagine what it will be like to become a citizen of heaven. The great Pope Benedict XVI has a wonderful line where he says that every baptized Christian ought to have 1 foot on earth and 1 foot in heaven. 1 foot on earth, 1 foot in heaven. What does that mean? It means that we, of course, have things that we have to do right here on earth. You and I have been, from the day of our baptism, called into a particular vocation, a particular mission on this earth. We talk a lot in this parish about evangelization, about growing in holiness. That's our mission, yours and mine, on this earth. But this is not ultimately what we're destined for. We see that in the story of the Transfiguration. Jesus takes his kind of big three. He had the 12 apostles, but of the 12 apostles, really 3 were with him at some of the key moments. For us, they were so important, we put statues of them up in our church. We have John in the green, Peter in the blue, and James over here on the right in the gray. Paul gets sort of thrown in there because Peter and Paul knew each other, and Paul was a great apostle. But Peter, James, and John go with Jesus up this high mountain to pray. And what happens on that mountain is something extraordinary. Jesus is, the gospel tells us, transfigured before them. We don't really have a real clear idea of what that exactly looked like. We're told he became dazzling white. His face shined. Peter, James, and John got a little glimpse of heaven. They got a little glimpse of what the resurrection would be like. They got a little taste of citizenship in heaven. But there's a line in there that we can miss, I think, that as Jesus does this, as Jesus is transfigured before them, as Jesus shows them the beauty of eternal life, the beauty of heaven, he's also talking about going to Jerusalem. Why would he go to Jerusalem? We know that he goes to Jerusalem to suffer and to die. That's what we're doing in this season of Lent. We're on a journey towards Easter. But that journey has us walking through the difficult times in the life of Jesus Christ. Several weeks from now, when we get to Holy Week, we go to Palm Sunday, when Jesus was welcomed triumphantly into Jerusalem, and then just a few days later, betrayed by all his friends. Without Good Friday, on the day on which Jesus died, there's no Easter Sunday. And so all that is to say is that suffering is a part of life. We don't want it to be. We wish it didn't always have to come our way. We wish sometimes that it would be less than it is. But it's a reality in every person's life. Every person right now, in some way, has some suffering in their life, some difficulty. It's part of life, but I want you to hear loud and clear, it's part of life, but it's not meaningless. That suffering has a purpose. And the season of Lent kind of shows us what that purpose is. The Transfiguration shows us what that purpose is. Jesus says, before I can rise, I have to die. I'm going to go to Jerusalem and suffer and die, and then the resurrection will happen. And so for us, as much as we want to experience the joy and the beauty of the Transfiguration of heaven, we're not there yet. We have this life to live, a life that's often full of great joy. I love being a priest. I love being a part of this parish, because to be a part of that is to be a part of the really celebratory and wonderful moments in the lives of people. What I saw that day back in Tulsa was 50 people experiencing tremendous joy at reaching a particular goal, citizenship of the United States. I've seen those joys, and you have too. But we also know that suffering is a part of life. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. If it hasn't happened, it's going to happen. But I want you to hear loud and clear that that suffering is not meaningless. That suffering has a point. That suffering has a purpose. And it's to help us and to prepare us for something greater. Not in this life, but in the life to come. 1 foot on earth, 1 foot in heaven. You and I are being prepared in this life for something greater, for something eternal. Citizenship in heaven. Finally, every time we come to Mass, we get a little glimpse of heaven. In the celebration of the Mass, heaven and earth come together. When we receive Holy Communion, when we're in the presence of the Eucharist, we get a little taste of what Peter and James and John saw up on that mountain. A little glimpse of heaven. And that's where you and I are headed. So we ask the Lord to give us in this life endurance, fortitude, to endure the sufferings, so that in the life to come, we will fulfill our goal, citizenship in heaven.